everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show that recaps all things Eagles related from the last 7 days and the 7 days ahead as well. And what a 7 days it has been. The NFL draft is in the books, and the Eagles in Dallas arguably stole the show while David Akers stole the heart. It was a roller coaster event. We saw franchise quarterbacks drafted, we saw some shocking trades, and then under the radar, just a smart, solid, non-sexy draft. And we're going to get onto that and why that was so important for this franchise in just a little while. But before we get on with today's show, I just wanted to give a quick public service announcement. If this is your first time listening to the Outside Insider podcast, thank you so much. Hit that description in the link below. It takes you to iTunes. You can subscribe to it there, and then you get my lovely British high-pitched tones on your phone without needing to ever lift a button again. If you've got a computer or an iPad, whatever it is you're listening to this on, it will go straight to your device without even having to bother to check Twitter or the website itself. It's free to absolutely subscribe. You can hit that link. Give us a rating of 5 stars as well if you enjoy it, because that really does help us. And make sure you get this episode each week to your device. So we're going to get straight into it with the NFL draft and the event, as I said earlier, which David Akers quite rightfully stole and got some vengeance for Philly after Drew Pearson, kind of put some tarnish on the name and left a sour taste in the mouths of Eagles fans 1 year ago. But before we get into each pick and recapping that, I just wanted to take a couple of moments to discuss the actual draft direction, because coming into this event, a lot of people are assuming that the Eagles, they have to get a certain need. They need a nickel cornerback, they need a linebacker, they need to get a big, strong safety, they need to get X, Y, and Z. It has to be a running back. They've got to take, obviously, Darius Geis in the first round was the name that was linked for many, many weeks, and they did neither of those things. In fact, they went through the entire draft without drafting an entire skill position. The entire draft, they didn't draft one skill position player. Now, obviously, undrafted free agents are uncounted for, but why was that? Why, when you need a wide receiver, arguably, potentially, just to shore up the depth for long term, a running back, arguably, to shore up the depth for long term, a linebacker, why were the Eagles so intent on drafting the way they did? And the answer is simple, that sexy isn't always best. And I've said this since day one. Now again, I said in last week's show, I was told a year ago in February by a reliable source, the Eagles are building from the ball out. Don't be surprised to see heavy investments on the offensive and defensive lines. I put it out in an article. This is what happened. We saw, obviously, Tim Jernigan, Fletcher Cox. We saw some big names on the offensive front receive contract extensions. We see some new depth coming in now with this draft as well. The trenches are where football is won and lost. The Eagles are aware of that, and they've built a fortress in front of their franchise quarterback, which is absolutely what you should be doing. Okay. Now, this draft very much followed suit. Three of their five, draft picks were close, if not on the offensive line. Now, Dallas Goedert may not be a blocking tight end like Brent Selleck, but it means that then someone such as Richard Rodgers has less leniency on the receiving side of things and can somewhat replace what they lost in Selleck. You then have 2 offensive linemen brought in as well, a defensive end who shores up the other side of the trenches, and a cornerback. Now, a lot of people with this draft have been kind of, maybe not so much doubting it, but worried that they didn't draft a linebacker, that they didn't go in for those talents, that they didn't reach. And the one thing that we all heard, obviously, with the draft circle just ever growing bigger and bigger and the rumours flying around. I mean, there was a rumour at one point that the Eagles were going to trade with the Bills to get LaShawn McCoy, which at this point, I may as well do that. I could trade for LaShawn McCoy if that's true. I mean, you just get stupid season with rumours. It always happens because I think the media do get kind of lost in the circus for a lot of it. Or the other side of it is that you've got a lot of pieces trying to make moves, and the information you often get from sources is vested interest. It's someone trying to get a bit of leverage over another angle. It's a player trying to get an extension or trying to force a way out of a market. You see it 9 times out of 10. So it's not necessarily that those pieces of information are wrong. It's just they're driving a certain narrative for a certain party. Anyway, the Eagles stuck to their plan. And it was a plan that was implemented last year that they're building through the draft. And we've seen this from day one with their prove-it contracts, where they bring in veterans such as Chris Long, such as LeGarrette Blount, such as some of the bigger names that we saw on this team throughout the last couple of years. Paul Warrilow has been another brilliant addition that's gone severely under the radar. And you allow the younger talent drafted in the later rounds of the draft to develop. Now, whether Lane Johnson can be attributed to that with Big V, we're not too sure. I mean, it's a similar sort of thing. But Corey Clement has been a big one, obviously under LeGarrette Blount. We saw what happened with Derek Barnett growing under the wings of Chris Long and Brandon Graham. The Eagles are building through the draft. The receivers that are coming in, your Matt Collins and Shelton Gibson, they're not relied on for impact straight away. They're not forced into the front firing lines to get absolutely obliterated. Rasul Douglas even was not expected in day one to go out there. Now, he was put into the game when injury struck, but he came in last year, held his own very well. But what this means is that as time goes on, the veterans leave. By the time they lose that salary cap of that 3 or 4 mil or whatever it may have been, you've then got younger guys still in their rookie contracts who are still cheap and affordable, who can then stand up to those roles, make it their own. They're going into the peak of their career and they're shining. At that point, you start building the other positions, and at the end of their rookie deals, you're building through the draft again. It's a constant cycle, and it takes a long time normally to implement, and Howie Roseman has done a marvellous job at getting it done straight away. But what about the teams who don't do that? And this is the perfect example I can find for anyone. You can share this with absolutely anyone you like who has had a go at this Eagles draft class that says, we didn't draft a running back, we didn't get a wide receiver. Well, okay, it doesn't matter. Okay, the reason for it is this. Back in 2015, a certain franchise known as the Indianapolis Colts had a remarkable quarterback prospect by the name of Andrew Luck, who in the years prior, who had led them to back-to-back playoff appearances and had pretty much decimated the league and told the world that, you know what, I am the successor to Peyton Manning. The problem was that the Colts' offensive line was pretty much a turnstile, and I could be blocking for them and, probably do it better. So they needed offensive linemen, okay, because the one thing you need to do when you've got a franchise quarterback is protect them. I mean, that's, common sense, but for some reason with the NFL draft, when you've got a lot of different pieces moving around and the appeal of the stars and the sexy wide receivers and the big name corners, it's easy to get lost and just take a reach. So what did the Colts do in 2015? Should we go back through their draft class in what was arguably their most impactful draft class since drafting Andrew Luck? Because it was getting towards the end of his rookie contract. You've got some big name wide receivers there that he still not really had the benefit. You had T.Y. Hilton obviously back at that point. What did they do? In round 1, they drafted Philip Dorsett. He's now with the New England Patriots. Cornerback DeJuan Smith in the 3rd round. He's no longer with the team. Defensive end Henry Anderson is no longer with the team. Safety Clayton Geathers had 8 tackles in 2017. Defensive tackle David Patton, he's no longer with the team. Running back Josh Rott, he's not with the team. Linebacker Armando Herrera, no longer with the team. It took the Colts 7 rounds to draft an offensive lineman. And that lineman is still with the team, would you believe it or not. 6'7", 320 pounds, offensive guard Denzel Good from Mars Hill University. And you know what? He hasn't panned out too badly, has he? He's done all right, Denzel Good. So of the picks they've made, 2 of them are with the team, the rest have gone. If that's not a franchise in disarray, that don't know how to build through the draft, that don't understand how to surround a quarterback with talent, I don't know, because now the Colts are in an even stranger position. But when you're just going off that draft alone, that's how not to build through the draft. What the Eagles did, and we're going to go through pick by pick now, alright, pick by boring pick, to reference a Pink Floyd album for those slightly older among us. I say older, I mean I'm 23 and I sound like I'm 15, but that's a discussion for another day. 2nd round, Dallas Goedert. The Eagles traded back into the 2nd round because they didn't want to reach for a talent. Oh no, Darius Guice is still on the board by the time they pick in the 2nd. Now that doesn't show you why he slipped to them in the first place. Obviously there's been a lot of debate after the draft about what's happened to him, but I'd say that's a pretty good indication that the Eagles made the right call there to pass on the LSU running back. The Eagles instead picked up a South Dakota State tight end at 6'5", 260 pounds that's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, 1,300 receiving yard games, And you know what? As someone that they're trying to replace Trey Burton with, I'd say it's a pretty good shout, wouldn't you? I'd say that's a pretty good indication that they've got what they want there. He's 4th in school history with 2,988 receiving yards. And the man is a complete catching machine. If you haven't seen it already, I broke down his tape just yesterday over at the Philly Sports Network YouTube channel. And not only can he run crisp routes, but he's got incredibly soft hands. He's able to box out much smaller defensive backs, and he's a mismatch nightmare for opposing safeties. Now, of course, at the next level, that is going to get a bit more difficult. The competition's going to rise, but with 3 drops out of 80 targets, good going. That is a strong pick. The Eagles have now got Zach Ertz through 2020. They're going to have Dallas Goedert through 2020. They're going to have all their offensive linemen near enough through 2020. They've got 2 to 3 years before they even need to think about contract extensions right now. And with another prove-it tight end in Richard Rodgers, by the time he passes up on his deal, you've got Shepherd undrafted free agent Billy Brown ready to step up into the boots as well. That is a perfect pick. Now, last year, I was actually lobbying for the Eagles to take a tight end in the first round. And I remember actually, going back and forth and tweeting with Teron Davenport about this. I was 100% down for that. You bite while the market is hot, you bring in that tight end now, and you prepare. And they've done that just a year later. And obviously their first round pick, last year is a very different story, and a man who went on to record the most iconic strip sack in franchise history. But Dallas Goedert is going to have a fundamental piece in this Eagles offense. And who do you block now? You've got Alshon Jeffrey outside, Mike Wallace on the other, Aguilar in the slot, and a 2 tight end set of Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. Where do you line your guys up to cover? If it's man coverage, someone is getting beat. It's just a Russian roulette of who. And for Carson Wentz, that's a huge target. That's a man with an exceptional catch radius. This offense may well be the most explosive in the league with this pick. Moving on to the 4th round, which was the Eagles' next pick, and that man was Avonte Maddox. Now, my heart kind of skipped a few beats. I'm not going to say if Maddox was a draft crush because, at this point, I don't see myself as a fan of the team at all. I'm much more just focused on working and analysing and breaking things down. But from a drafting perspective, Maddox is everything the Eagles could ever want. Now, sure, he's a little undersized. I mean, he's not quite the tallest cornerback out there. But the fact that he's run a 4.39 40, he can hold his own. He's a very physical cornerback as well. He's not a guy that's going to shy away from the run like we've seen with some of the other names in this draft class. He's a corner with 51 passes defense to his name, who attacks the ball at its high point, and his short area quickness, I should say, is among the best in this class, without a single doubt in my mind. Now, I'm going to be having another film room breakdown on this as well, and a lot of people are lobbying for Maddox to be lining up in the slot. I still think he's got a shot outside, or even over the top of the safety position. It's not that long ago that Jalen Watkins was drafted in the 4th round as a cornerback. Ended up beating out Blake Countess due to congestion at the safety position. Moved in and became a reliable piece for the Eagles, which allowed Malcolm Jenkins to run riot all up and down the field. And that is what would not surprise me. Now, he's going to have to battle Trey Sullivan for that position if that's the case. I still think the Eagles' best bet is to move Jalen Mills inside, start Ronald Darby and Sidney Jones outside, and then you've got Mills, who played slot in his rookie season, someone that has got that level of physicality needed. He's got that level of drive to really hustle down that position. And the thing with Mills is that he can get beaten on deeper routes. He's going to have a lot less of that to worry about when looking for running backs out of the backfield or blitzing the quarterback. So that would be my prediction. There's a lot can change between now and then, but I would see Maddox as a real flex guy, a cornerback that's got safety tendencies, that hits like an absolute freight train, and in this Jim Schwartz defense could be an absolute homing missile. There's no other way to look at it. He's the perfect nickel cornerback that could take a little bit longer to blossom and would really benefit from that extra safety over the top. But I do think that he's got a perfect burst on the ball. He breaks very well on his routes. He's very twitchy in his fluid movement. And I think his back paddle is among the smoothest in his class. He keeps his arms compact. He's going to be a problem at the next level, especially with Corey Undlin. So this was easily my favourite pick of the draft. if you can't tell. Like, I'm not reading this off. This is just literally from, breaking this down for the cornerback consensus guide about a month or so ago. He's easily one of my favourite nickel corners in this draft, and he's got a tremendous amount of upside in this secondary with Jim Schwartz. Now, the next pick, Josh Sweat, was, I think, one of those where every Eagles fan who studied the draft, every analyst who studied the draft, was absolutely stunned at. Okay, so the Florida State pass rusher, who, I believe, off the top of the head, I think it's 14.5 sacks. I mean, that's stunning. High school injury concerns were downplayed. He went through his entire career at FSU as one of the biggest, baddest, most explosive pass rushers in this draft. And he slides to the Eagles because of injury concerns. The Eagles have got one of the most, I would say, stout, but certainly most refined sports science programs in the NFL. And bizarrely enough, you can thank Chip Kelly for that. Your old friend Chip Kelly that everyone hates, he was the one that really elevated that sports science area. And now they've got themselves a 6'5", 251-pound defensive end that is an absolute beast on the outside. And what do you do if you're an offensive line? At pairing 1, you've got Brandon Graham and Chris Long. Pairing 2, you've got Sweat and Barnett. That's phenomenal. And again, that's Brandon Graham, whose future could be in doubt, depending on whether he gets extended or no. That's Chris Long, that didn't really know if he was going to come back this season. And what you've now got is 2 players as rookies who can learn under them and take up those spots when they eventually free up, potentially. That's a big move for the Eagles. A money move in Josh Sweat. Now, Matt Pryor, we actually interviewed just yesterday at phillysportsnetwork.com, and I was blown away with the type of man that he is. Now, you get it a lot with offensive linemen where they are naturally very domineering characters. Because of their bulky frame, because of the nature of their job, it is naturally just smash mouth football. They don't mess around. They're very to the point, and that's great because you get fired up in the interviews. But I scheduled this interview with Matt about 2 days before. I call him at the time we kind of agree on, and after discussing the interview, I ask, what's your daily schedule looking like now between now and when you land in Philly in 2 weeks' time? His answer was, well, I just got done working out right now. And you could hear in the background people coming up to him saying congratulations. He was at a gym. He was at a gym. He's that focused on work, he's at a gym while doing an interview. That's not poor preparation. That's just him really getting things down so he's got the world at his feet and taking all that time possible to prepare. What's also underrated is that as someone that spent time at both right guard and tackle during his time at TCU, spent a season at guard and then flexed between the two in his senior year, he dropped 10 pounds for his pro day. He entered his pro day at 6'7", 328. He's listed at 338. So he showed scouts, I should say, that he's willing to put in that work so he can get down to a playing minimum that they need. He can adjust to whatever scheme he's drafted into, and he can be a guard or a tackle. He's got the athleticism to do both. The thing about this pick that a lot of people aren't looking at is think about the Eagles' right guard position. You can say Brandon Brooks is a franchise guy. I don't think he's allowed a sack since week 1 of 2016, I believe the stat is. I can't think of the player. It was a Cleveland Browns player. I cannot think of the name of who it was. It was a linebacker. But he's not allowed a sack since then. Brilliant. Who's behind him? What happens if Brooks goes down? Well, then you go to... Isaac Sayamalo. Great. Or Chance Warmack. Great. So Stefan Wisniewski became the Eagles' starting left guard because it took the entire OTAs, the entire training camp, and up to week 2 losing against the Chiefs for Doug Peterson to go, you know what? Isaac, Chance, none of you guys have emerged as a clear winner in this battle. Stefan's the veteran. He understands the game. He's been here the year before. Go fly. Best decision the team have made. So Sayamalo, now entering his 3rd season, is at a severe setback because he's been given opportunity, he's been given time, he's been given all the luxury in the world of an opportunity and a platform to compete and prove his worth. And he's still not done it. And Chance Warmack, a grizzled veteran, a former 1st round pick who Jeff Stoutland worked with at Alabama, couldn't really prove it either. So who have you got now? What happens if Brooks and Wisniewski go down? You think the Eagles' offensive line with Chance Warmack and Sayamalo is going to be great against these opposing pass rushes? Well, that's fine. Well, now you went to Matt Pryor, someone that has a dominant frame, as we say, 6'7", 328 pounds. And he's now got this opportunity to come in and win out a depth spot at guard. But then what happens if Lane Johnson goes down? Who's the Eagles' other right tackle? What have we got? Because obviously Jason Peters is on one side. If Jason Peters goes down again this season, then it's Halapoulivaati Vaitai that steps up. Lovely. What about behind Lane Johnson? Well, not to worry, because now you've got Matt Pryor, someone who has played tackle at TCU and has got the athleticism to play both spots and develop in building through the draft at this level. Sure, the Eagles have, Taylor Hart. Brilliant. That's it. It's Taylor Hart who, in his 4 years, he's been serviceable as a depth piece at best, but he's not really, emerged as anything more than that. But he's built in a very similar frame to Matt Pryor, 6'6", 305. But again, I think that's going to be the main battle to watch. But Pryor can now fill both spots. And that is a huge get for the Eagles. And then, just in case it wasn't enough, in the 7th round, people are going, oh, but they had Josh Adams on the board. Oh, but there was a running back on the board. There was a linebacker on the board. If you're needing to get into the 7th round of a draft and you're still needing to fill a position, you're doing the draft wrong. If you've not filled a key roster hole by the 7th round, something hasn't gone to plan, and I would not want to come to work on Monday morning. But alas, the Eagles didn't have to worry about that, and they take a flyer on Australian rugby star Jordan Mailata. Now, we've all by now seen this absolute beast of a human from the South Sydney Rabbitohs at 6'8", 346, who, I'm not being funny, could probably get by as a running back. He's that dominant, or a fullback, or a kick returner, and that's the other thing to note. The Eagles, when Doug Peterson first came in as head coach, there was a lot of talk about fullbacks and who's it going to be? Is it going to be an existing running back? Are they going to find someone to fill this hole? Could Trey Burton do it? And then we get to training camp and there's a lot of pistol sets and jumbo formations and there's fullbacks in play. And then they bring in a couple of guys and none of them pan out and they still don't have a fullback. If you're telling me Mailata, after running, I think it was a 4.67 short shuttle, can't do fullback position, can't play that role, then I'm stunned, because the man is just an absolute monster among men. And at 20 years old, you can learn a game in 3 years. When you've got NFL coaching, he's part of the NFL International Pathway Program, so he's already been over looking at zone blocking schemes, looking at stuff like that. He's aware of the very basics now. And you're going to be learning from a Hall of Fame or a future Hall of Famer in Jason Peters, and potentially another one in Lane Johnson. That's a great pick. That is literally the definition of developmental talent, and I can't think of a reason as to why that's bad in the 7th round. And then to make things even better, the Eagles go into the undrafted free agents, and they get themselves Josh Adams, a running back out of Notre Dame, who could be fighting for a roster spot. And then another great pass rusher in Ostman as well. So overall, this was a smart draft. This was absolutely the smartest draft. Now, you look at mock drafts and it's very easy to get lost in the key needs and stuff like that. But this was perfect for the Eagles. Like, you could not really have asked for much better. The only thing I would maybe change, and it is a severe maybe, would be when trading back. Well, obviously, we didn't know which other offers were on the table, but maybe getting an extra 3rd round pick and picking up a linebacker. But without context, you don't really know. And that is such an if, but, or maybe, that if you're having to go to that extent to say what you do differently, probably a good draft. So Howie Roseman hits it out of the park. And again, the logic behind it is they're not falling for the stars and the divas and the big personalities that are going to command a lot of money. Alshon Jeffrey was lured here on a brilliant deal, which now, when you look at some of the deals being paid elsewhere, is made to seem like a huge bargain. You've got Des Bryant that can't get a gig. You've got Odell Beckham that was sat available to the entire market for about 2 weeks, and no one put in an offer because they don't want the salary. No one wants to pay him a ridiculous amount of money for the amount of distraction he will bring to that roster. And that is such a big thing. Yes, the Eagles went and drafted Donnell Pumphrey. They've drafted Wendell Smallwood, but I mean, they're not drafting big name stars with big name attention with red flags to their name. It's such a different way of drafting. And it is a remarkable, I think, fresh change. It's a completely new slate for the Eagles since probably the end of the 2015 season, I would say. Like, from the moment Chip Kelly went to the start of when they traded for Carson Wentz, and they've drafted him, and then you had the quarterback controversy. The way this culture has been built to be selfless and like a family, and where the main object is playing for each other, that they don't have those big distracting personalities, Michael Bennett aside, it's just been a really, really refreshing change. And again, you can go out and buy the supercars, you can get the Porsche, you can get the Ferrari, you can get any kind of smart, sexy car you want, but when you've got to take your kids to work, well, I mean, school, if your kids are working, that's not good. You've got to take your spouses to work, you've got to drive it to work. It's not practical. You're not going to get very far. You look flashy. I'm sure you can make some lovely Instagram videos revving up that engine and, you know, putting it all across the tyres and seeing all the logos and stuff, but it's not practical. Whereas if you get yourself a 4x4 or a family car or, a convertible, then it's much better. You're going to get to work on time. You're going to get there. And probably in what is the worst comparison in the world imaginable, that's what the Eagles have done. They're not after supercars. They're not trying to go out and buy the most expensive, the flashiest, the most Instagrammable player imaginable. They just want guys that are going to come in, work their asses off, and get the job done. It's that simple. Again, if you're listening to this for your first time, thank you so much for tuning in, because this is definitely something we're going to be doing each and every week now. The podcast took a bit of a hiatus, I think, last year just because of some personal circumstances, but we are back every single week now, so that's a promise. If you're interested, hit that subscription button below, subscribe on iTunes, and give us a cheeky rate of 5 stars, because it wouldn't be, a rate if it wasn't cheeky. I'm British after all, right? But the other thing I want to talk about, and this is much more of a fun topic, is something that I'd like to say a friend of mine, Ben Solak, posted on Twitter very recently. Now, for those of you who aren't following Ben, you're doing him a dishonesty. He is a brilliant Eagles writer, one of my favourite to come to. He's a very young writer as well. I think definitely one of the future names to watch in this business. Also does a lot of scouting work and posted a 2018 contextualised quarterbacking guide. That's a tongue twister for you. Which charted all of the draft eligible quarterbacks this year. I've truly lost my words. I'm just getting flustered. That's all it is. It's my man crush on Ben. But honestly, he's a fantastic writer. Does a lot of great work. And his in-depth analysis is just remarkable. So go and give him a follow. But he did tweet out something interesting earlier. And I hope you won't mind me reading this out, because I did want to just discuss it for a second. And it was about one Eagles offensive lineman in particular. And that man was Halapoulivaati Vaitai. See, I didn't even mess that up. So my tongue-twisting days are over. We can do this. We can fight through. So Ben says, this fan base is outrageously loyal to Halapoulivaati Vaitai. I just don't understand it. Okay, alright, so let's examine it from this perspective. Now, we're not saying there aren't bigger, better linemen out there. We aren't saying the Eagles aren't, if they were offered a chance. They could have easily taken a Connor Williams in the first round of the draft, or someone such in that nature, but that's not to say that they're not outrageously loyal. What they are is very aware of what they've got in Halapoulivaati Vaitai, which, let's be honest, is a 5th round pick who in 2 years in the league has had to stand in for both Lane Johnson and Jason Peters. Now that is like being a cabaret singer being asked to follow on from Freddie Mercury and Madonna. Now, if you can sing both styles, all fair play to you. But the point I'm making is they are tremendous boots to fill. The first instance, obviously, he got absolutely embarrassed by Ryan Kerrigan. But was the offensive line performance that bad? What changed? Like, everyone looks at that 2016 season and says, Big V was awful. Big V couldn't block. Big V struggled. Vaitai wasn't as good as he could have been. He's a bust. Let's take a look, alright? In the 4 games prior to Lane Johnson's suspension, the Eagles gave up 21 offensive penalties. Alright, now that's including linemen as well, that's including receivers. They gave up 7 against the Lions, which was Johnson's last game before that PED ban. But since the rookie debut, so not counting that Redskins game, the Eagles gave up 29 offensive line penalties for the season. Alright? They gave up 21 penalties between weeks 1 and 4. They gave up 29 the rest of the year. Now, Lane Johnson and Jason Peters are two, in that year, very penalised players. Both of them, I believe, were inside the top 10 most penalised players in the league. Now, I understand that's not the only way you can grade an offensive lineman, and that with Pro Football Focus and how many steps back and arm twitches he does per second is now a thing, but it's a good, at least, trackable margin to see, is he disciplined? Is he patient? Can he be adaptable to circumstance and evading that pressure and letting it all get ahead of him? And absolutely. So in the weeks prior, again, we're going to do this one more time, looking at sacks and quarterback hits. Again, not all of these are directly related to Big V. There is going to be a noticeable hit, however. The 4 games before Johnson's ban, okay, against the Browns, 2 sacks, 9 QB hits. I won't going to go through the opponents because we'll be here forever, but it went 2-3, 0-7 to 7 QB hits and none against the Steelers. 3 sacks to the Lions and 3 QB hits. Right, so you can see a normal average of about 2 sacks, probably 5 quarterback hits. We'll take the Redskins out of it, where they allowed 5 sacks and 12 hits, okay? Because I'd like to treat that as an anomaly because, first game, completely overwhelmed. Against the Vikings, 0 sacks, 2 hits. Cowboys, 3-7. Giants 2-7, Falcons 2-3, Seattle 2-7, Packers 4-8, Bengals 1-11, Redskins 4-11, Ravens 5-1, Giants 0-3, Dallas 2-10. It's not that much of a drop off, is it? It's not like Carson Wentz is being Andrew Luck every game of his life. It's not like Carson Wentz is sat with his helmet in the turf every game of his life. If anything, it's just about the same. Do you know how many penalties Halapoulivaati Vaitai gave up in that first season? As far as I'm aware, now, again, this may need researching, so if you are listening to this, please fact check me on this, because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it's 0. I believe that Halapoulivaati Vaitai gave up 0 penalties, at least according to NFLpenalties.com. Now, there was an unnamed player that got 5, so I think that's just, illegal formations and having 12 men on the field and stuff like that. So, overall, none. 0. Red flag, nothing. Great. Now again, Vaitai wasn't perfect. These aren't the only boundaries we're judging on. Let's get to 2017, after a year in which he was completely obliterated by fans and analysts everywhere, and people saying that he's a bust and that he's not good and that he's struggling, that he's too slow and that he's letting up all these pressures. The Eagles, when Jason Peters went down, thrust him into the game, and they gave him help. And this is the thing that everyone's overlooking. They don't need Halapoulivaati Vaitai to be great. They don't need him to be Jason Peters. They don't even need him to be Taylor Hart. They just need him to go out there, be mildly competent, and let everyone else just do a little bit extra. Just slide that run. Have Wisniewski come over and give a little nudge. Have Kelsey come up at the second level and make an extra block. And that's what Pro Bowlers do. Vaitai, at this stage in his career, isn't quite a Pro Bowler, alright? But what he does have is the patience, the thick base. I did a film room piece on this as well, as to how he contained one Everson Griffin. And a lot of it was through his own right. He wasn't, leaned on. It's not like he's got a security blanket around him, or they've covered him in pillows and just Siamese attached Stefan Wisniewski to his right hip. He held his own. He was very good. Alright? And you take a look at that Vikings game, right? NFC Championship. Everson Griffin, an 8-year veteran out of USC, lines up against Halapoulivaati Vaitai, who has been recklessly embarrassed by Ryan Kerrigan twice in his career. Okay? In that season, Griffin has 13 sacks and 3 forced fumbles. You can't even call that dominant. That's a whole new echelon level. That's someone playing rookie on Madden. Is what that is. Everson Griffin was a beast. Do you want to know what he did against Halapoulivaati Vaitai in the NFC Championship game? 2 quarterback hits, 2 tackles. I'll say it again. Just in case, we missed that. Maybe the wind was blowing or something. Let's just let this set in. I'll take a sip of my tea and you can make your own judgment. Everson Griffin against Halapoulivaati Vaitai. 2 quarterback hits, 2 tackles. And you're telling me now that people are outrageously loyal to Halapoulivaati Vaitai? They're not loyal to Vaitai. The team. What other options have the team got at the minute? It's Taylor Hart. Excellent. Do they draft Connor Williams? Well, they don't need to, because Vaitai just held one of the NFL's best pass rushes to 2 quarterback hits and as many tackles, and picks up a vital block that Wisniewski let go on 4th and 1 in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. Without it, the team may not have won. I mean, you're a starting left tackle in the Super Bowl on the winning team that holds the Patriots defense ragged and protects a backup quarterback in a postseason run. I don't know what more you want from him. He was never drafted as a Laramie Tunsil. He was never expected to be a Pro Bowler by year 2. He wasn't even drafted to be a backup. Like, he's there just to develop and learn. Johnson on the right, Peters on the left. Eventually, Johnson's going to go left and Vaitai takes over the right. That's the aim. Injuries and suspensions you cannot account for. And Vaitai has gone in as a 5th round pick, held his own. There hasn't been a decline in the offensive line. And he held Everson Griffin to 2 quarterback hits and 2 tackles. That's argument number 1. Argument number 2 we're going to get into right now isn't so much the player, it's to do with the person he is. And people say, oh, well, why are they outrageously loyal? The type of guy that he is, and there are 2 examples I've got of this. One of them, I actually spoke to his high school head coach. Okay, so Halapoulivaati Vaitai used to play for Holtom High School, and after the Super Bowl, I decided to reach out to his head coach and just ask him about Halapoulivaati, about the kind of man that he was back then, how he's grown, has he changed, is he everything that he expected to be? Now, I know a lot of players still do this, and they hang on to their roots very tightly because, that's the place that made you. But even to this day, Halapoulivaati Vaitai goes back to his high school, and in the words of his old head coach, he's been a visible presence since he's graduated, which is nice, because the kids don't see him as just some guy that came through here. Once a semester they'll see him, he'll come talk to them before workouts. It's nice for them to see someone competing on that big stage. He goes back to his high school to talk to the students that are there, to help them, to coach them, to give them a bit of inspiration. And that's such a big asset. That's the type of guy that he is. That's the sort of player we're talking about. It's not just a big, arrogant lineman who collects his paycheck and walks out of the building. He's a leader. He comes back and he helps. At TCU, as Coach Tucker puts it, you could tell right away he left a mark on the coaching staff as a person, not just a player. Now, it's easy for a coach to say that when you're endorsing someone, but when I spoke to Matt Pryor, the Eagles' 6th round pick, a former teammate, the 2 once bookended the TCU line when they're protecting Trevon Boykin and Kenny Hill. You've got, obviously, Vaitai at left tackle. You've then got, on the other side of things, Matt Pryor. And Pryor was just as complimentary. And the one thing that stood out was that he said 5 minutes after he'd been drafted, alright? 5 minutes after the biggest call of your life, Halapoulivaati Vaitai texted him. And within seconds, he's telling him about how good the city is, how amazing the team is, showing him the ropes of being a tackle. So I asked more about that relationship. I wanted to know how deep it was as former teammates. Did they get on? Did they bounce off each other? And in his own words, Pryor then says, even at freshman year at TCU, he was showing me the ropes while playing tackle, or helping me get used to the new state, how to handle college, how to handle football and classes at the same time. 5 minutes from the call, Vaitai phones him again. And apparently, this is what really stood out, this was something the two had discussed before he was even drafted. They were talking about the NFL and what it takes to be a tackle at the next level and the work you've got to put in. This was weeks before. I mean, he had one of his 30 visits in Philadelphia, but this was weeks before Halapoulivaati was texting him, offering him advice, just as he did during that freshman year. It's not just about what you see on the field. It's about being a leader. It's about buying into that culture, being a key cog. Because there's going to come a day where Halapoulivaati Vaitai is likely the starting left tackle. He is the franchise guy, opposite lane on the right. And if you've got a silent guy that walks in, walks out, it's not going to do you any good. The Eagles have drafted a leader. And you can look at that season, you can say he's average, you can say anything you want. It's not being outrageously loyal, it's being aware of what they've got. And what they've got is a tackle with a lot of upside, who's shown a tremendous jump in potential from year 1 to year 2, and is an open leader, but isn't loud about it. He's not loud and in your face and telling you, he's showing you through actions that other people tell you wantingly. That's the sort of player the Eagles want. That's the sort of player the Eagles got. And I would not blame any fan in this universe for getting a Vaitai jersey because of that. Because that's a person you want to idolise. And that's all we've got for today. So Ben, this wasn't a jab at you at all, my friend. Keep doing the amazing work you are. But I did, it's the off-season. I know you've just had the draft. There's not a tremendous amount still to talk about while the storm settles before OTAs. I just wanted to take that point and counter-argue it. Now, I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts on it. You're a metrics guy. You've got a lot of stats. Hit me back. Let's have a debate and keep it fun as well, obviously. But you know what, guys? It's been an amazing show. Go and follow Ben on Twitter. It'd be amazing to get him on one day, actually, and fully discuss this in a little debate. But I've really enjoyed this show. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter at LiamJenkins21 at PhiladelphiaSN and hit that subscribe button in the link below. You'll get the new show every week, but from myself, Liam Jenkins, thank you so much again. We'll see you next week for another episode of The Outside Inside.